Welcome back to the morning show here on Iraj News. Joining us now to take a look at the news stories making headlines around the globe is Iraj News correspondent Aron Akerejola. Hello, Aron.
Yeah, good morning.
Hi, Aaron. Good morning.
Good morning,
Good
Doctor.
to see you.
Yes, it's good to be here today. Fantastic Friday. Looking forward to a very restful.
Thank God it's Friday.
Yeah, I don't do thank God it's Friday. I will see my own Fridays as a precursor to the night before where I get to rest properly. Yes.
Anyway, what's going on?
All right, we'll be starting off from the U.S. From Nigeria, yes, with still it's been trending for a while right now. And let's tell you that the United States have actually called for a thorough investigation into the recent clashes between members of the Islamic movement in Nigeria and security forces. In a statement on Thursday, the U.S. Embassy in Nigeria urged the federal government to hold everyone responsible for the violence to account. The IMN, members better known as Shiites, have been clashing with policemen and soldiers in various parts of Abuja since Saturday. They are protesting the continued detention of Ibrahim El-Zakzaki, almost mixing that one up, their leader. While the army said that 3 persons were killed during one of the protests, the Shiites have declared over 1,000 of their members missing.
Well, this matter was bound to generate international interest.
Yes.
And I think that the intervention by the United States Embassy is very important. It's something that the federal government of Nigeria should take seriously. And it is as follows. One, you recall that, we had Boko Haram on our hands, in part because of the mismanagement, of that group, the Boko Haram group originally by government. And then that group became over-radicalized. And look at where we are today, many years after dealing with that terrorism and, other acts of low-level insurgency. The Shiites, the way the government has been relating with them since about 2015, requires this kind of caution that is coming from the United States Embassy to say that, look, justice must be done. Whoever is involved, whoever has run foul of the law should be brought to justice. And then, there have been complaints by human rights groups, particularly Amnesty International. Amnesty International issued a statement saying that, look, government is not providing enough information, making proper disclosures about the number of persons that were killed. The military, they are insisting only 6 persons died, but the figures that have been given, indicated, of course, by the burials that have been carried out by the Shiites, will be in the range of 39 or 45 even. 39 persons were buried in one place yesterday. Another 6 were buried in Zaria. So that's about 45. Even if it is one life that was lost in this situation in which we see abuse of weapons, by the military, using live bullets to control crowd and all of that. Then, of course, beyond this, the international side of it again is, we've made a point here that, look, these Shiites, they are pro-Iraq, they are pro-Palestine, they are pro-Iran, right? And when you attack them, you don't know what the implications could be on a long term. Of course, again, involved in this is also the sectarian politics between Sunnis and Shiites. Sunnis constitute about 85% of all Muslims worldwide. It wasn't just a Zakzaki protest that we had. It was also the week of the Abin, which is the commemoration of the burial, the mourning period for the burial, for the death of the great-grandson of the Prophet, Hussein, the son of the second Caliph Ali. So all of these, are part of the subtext of what you find. But we cannot afford, within the Muslim community in Nigeria, any kind of, sectarian crisis that could affect everything else, particularly at the time of elections.
True talk. When you look at it, it's high time that the federal government, instead of just keeping numb and just keeping mum rather, and just probably pretending that this is not really happening, this is when they actually have to come out and say that this is the reason why we're not following the rule of law, because if in 2015 the court had actually granted Kazaki freedom and said that he can actually go, and the federal government is still holding him, this is high time they actually begin to give real reasons why he's still being held between that time and this particular time, because at least that would actually give a sense of understanding for those that are actually following him, and at the end of the day, they do not see the government as actually antagonizing them unnecessarily, because that's what it is.
The Shiites are even saying that about 400 of them are in police custody. Or you quoted 1,000, but I think, officially, what we were told is about 400 of them are in detention. Now, it's not for government to detain them perpetually.
True.
If they have committed any offense, they should be taken to court. And I think that this is really obvious, But it's important, however, that the United States is drawing the government's attention to the risks involved.
Like we've always been saying about key and pertinent issues that has been going on in the country, I feel that this particular government, where they've actually faltered on several occasions, has been more reactive than proactive. You're asking for proactivity, that they should actually foresee the future and actually nip it in the bud. But right now, everybody seems to be taking this with kid gloves until it now degenerates past the point whereby we begin to ask ourselves, how did we get to this point? I
think the fulcrum of all of this, it's interesting to see that the international committee is particular about this Shiite incident. The fulcrum of it I see here is human rights abuses. With the Amnesty International saying that way above 6, about 45, according to them, were killed. The statement by the U.S. that was released on its site, the U.S. Embassy site in Nigeria, was drawing attention to the fact that the military and the police officers used live ammunition on protesting members of the society. So I think that the government needs to sit up and again look at that particular angle of it. It's not just to see this as another invasion, or maybe that's not the word, to see this as another meddling of the international community, but to say you need to step back and reevaluate your human rights, the way you treat your citizens.
True.
They have rights to protest, but however, even if they fall short of the manner in which they protest, should you then go ahead with using live ammunition to quell protests? I think, for me, that is the major point to look at here by the federal government.
I hope they can actually answer the questions that has been thrown to them.
The federal government cannot even accuse the U.S. of meddling. This is not a question of meddling. The whole of that crisis, in Syria, in Yemen, in Iraq, in Iran, it's all about,
but in recent
at a certain level, about the fight between Sunnis and Shiites.
In recent times,
it's an international issue.
But in recent times, you've seen the reaction of this particular government to whether it's statistics, whether it's reports by international bodies. They've taken a stance of being defensive. Take it from the Dapchi Girls report by the United Nations saying ransom was paid. They took a defensive position. Take it from Amnesty saying the IPOB protest, it was a defensive position. So I'm just saying...
And it brings me to my point exactly, that they should not be reactive, because when reports or when things like this are being pushed to their table, it's easy to just want to deflect it and say, and give a number of reasons. But this is when you need to actually be proactive about this, so that, because who knows, the government might not be in power, and and future governments and future Nigerians might be suffering the implications of not nipping this in the bud when it was still at its embryo stage. Well, we'll still keep tabs on it. It's still a developing story. But still in Nigeria, let's say that the main opposition party in Nigeria, People's Democratic Party, the PDP, says its presidential candidate will reduce the cost of premium motor spirits, the PMS, popularly known as petrol, to 87 naira to 90 naira per litre. In a statement by the spokesman of the People's Democratic Party, Kola Ologbadiyan, the party said that former Vice President Atiku Abubakar has consulted with international players in the oil industry and found that the President Muhammadu Buhari's administration is fleecing Nigerians. The PDP alleged that the cabals within the Buhari government are diverting 58 naira on every litre of petrol sold. The PDP also asked the APC government to account for 3.49 trillion naira stolen under the subsidy regime. Heavy.
Well, I mean, these are very serious allegations.
Heavy allegations, I would say.
But, we can't just rely on a press statement.
True.
When you fix home price of oil, there are many considerations, yes, including landing price, including the amount that you refine locally, the amount that you, that you import to supplement local refining of crude and all of that. So, but a press statement cannot give us, the full details in terms of strategy. We should be talking in terms of strategy. If the PDP campaign is promising to make sure that there is a reduction in the pump price of fuel, then they should give us the calculations. That is one point, so that we separate, deep thinking from political campaign talk. The other leg of it is that, it's very common during election time for, candidates to make a lot of promises. After all, in 2015, the APC overpromised. The APC told us that the naira will become one-to-one with the dollar, So sometimes political rhetoric.
And even the price of oil and subsidy was a key campaign issue going into 2015 elections.
So sometimes, political rhetoric is used to inspire, to mobilize the people. I mean, even President Buhari himself, at some point, denied some of those promises that were made. He said he never said so. Okay, so to the extent that this is not even, coming directly from Vice President Atiku Abubakar himself, we should just say, well, we have noted it. But if it happens, of course, Nigerians will be happy. They would like to pay less. But there are things to worry about. Sure. I mean, are our refineries working? What is the strategy for getting those refineries to work? What is the strategy for working out a proper framework for importation of fuel and all of that? Because I think the devil is in the details, not in the promise. Because
promises about reduction of crude oil, petrol, for example, promises have always been made. Every government since 1999, this current dispensation of democracy, they've always been increasing. Aside Yadua, who actually reduced fuel pump price from what he met at that time, 75 to 65, every other government that has actually come in have actually increased the cost of petrol in Nigeria. And it goes to that particular point, rather than promising to even reduce, because as we said, it's only Yadua that has been able to do that. Obasanjo increased from 20 to about 75.
Yeah, but there are things that government can do to make the situation better.
Yes.
Get the refineries working, plug leakages and wastages, ensure greater efficiency and transparency in the oil and gas sector. Yeah. That's why I said, the devil is in the details.
True.
And how each government, works out those details would have a corresponding impact on what we see, both in the market and in terms of impact on our individual lives.
Yeah, I've said it all. We have to begin to make common sense of this. If you have crude here and then you have to export to then bring in refined product until we make proper sense of our mono economy as we have it for now, we're going to have these issues cropping up every time.
All right. Away from Nigeria, let's actually touch our spotlight on what is going on in Africa and tell you that Zimbabwe's President Emerson Mnangagwa has announced the discovery of potential oil and gas deposits in the north of the country. Australian mining firm Invictus Energy, in partnership with the government, is to determine whether commercial drilling is feasible. The president also says an exploration well would be sunk by Invictus in Muzarabani district within 2 years. Zimbabwe is experiencing its worst economic crisis in a decade. Fuel shortages are frequent problems, and there are many power cuts.
Let's hope that oil doesn't become a curse to Zimbabwe, like we are almost seeing it. Some people argue that rather than being a blessing to Nigeria, it's gradually turning into a curse. Apart from this alleged corruption cases we see, we also see the degradation of the environment of this oil-producing states. It's a happy one for Zimbabwe. I'm sure a lot of people will be happy. Coming from almost 4 decades of rule for the former president, Mugabe, who wasn't really a friend of the Western countries. And so the country had been isolated for a long time, and it wasn't exposed. The economy was bad. And if oil is booming now, we're seeing a rise of oil prices internationally. And if they begin to drill, I think that would be an additional plus for their economy.
Well, it's too early to jubilate or to congratulate Zimbabwe because, you know, if you find oil and gas deposits, it takes a process.
True.
And they are not likely to even, you know, start doing anything significant until about 2020. The oil that has been discovered is covering about 200 kilometers area, which is a lot. In fact, the Invictus Energy is even saying that this is about the largest deposit in Africa. But it's also a very difficult area for mining, and they will need a lot of finance, they will need a lot of loans. So we may not see anything happening until maybe much later in the future. But the point she made is right, that, well, oil comes with its own costs, as we have seen maybe in Nigeria, if we may start from home, and also in Venezuela, you know, where that resource has been thoroughly mismanaged. But what we also expect is that under Mnangagwa's watch, you know, there will be quality leadership provided, that, you know, discovery of oil will not become an excuse for taking, you know, his eyes off the more urgent issues in Zimbabwe of making sure that the economy recovers and that the quality of life index in that country rises.
I'm even disappointed that Zimbabwe are actually celebrating this. Of course, where the world is actually going to right now, whereby there's little emphasis put on natural resources as much as human resources. Because at the end of the day, you might have all the natural resources like we've actually seen in Nigeria and several parts of Africa, where it's gold, whether it's diamond, and all the costs that has come with it. But human resources, if human resources are built, regardless of a country that has or does not have natural resources, that country will thrive. And I think that's where the Western world have actually done tremendously well. Human resources have been built. But in Africa, we still focus on natural resources with the hope that at some point we'll get it right, then start focusing on human resources. It's been unfortunate that at this stage, in a jet age like this, we're still focusing more on natural resources as against human resources. It's really sad. Really sad. It has gotten us as a continent it has gotten us nowhere, I must say. Well, we must still move it on today and tell you that two former Goldman Sachs bankers and Malaysian financier Jolo have been hit with U.S. criminal charges in connection with one of the world's biggest financial scandals. The Department of Justice alleges that the men participated in a scheme that stole billions of dollars from Malaysia's development fund, the 1MDB. According to the department, one former Goldman banker pleaded guilty. The other banker has been arrested, while Mr. Low remains at large. Mr. Low had previously denied charges filed in Malaysia, adding that it will be impossible for him to receive a fair trial there.
Well, this has been an old issue in Malaysia. In fact, it was an election issue. And it was one of the reasons why the former Prime Minister, Nabil, lost the election, because he was accused, you know, of having mismanaged this, which was a fund that was supposed to benefit the poor, benefit the people. But at the end of the day, there were allegations of misappropriation of funds. And that even led to the investigation of the former Prime Minister, you know, and many of his assets were seized. Jewelry found with his wife were taken away. And, you know, it was the major reason why Mahathir Mohamad, you know, who had been former prime minister, was able to come back, because it was a big scandal. But what is interesting is the international dimension of it. And this just shows, you know, how the network of corruption, you know, can be international. But in the United States, you know, these two gentlemen who are being accused, they are denying. They say that they are innocent, you know. But we'll see how it goes. You know, it's just for people to realize that where corruption is involved, there could be, you know, consequences, you know, where you've been indicted. Yeah.
All right, so let's move to the U.S. to tell you that Robert Bowers, the alleged gunman accused of killing 11 Jewish worshippers at a Pittsburgh synagogue on Saturday, has pleaded not guilty. Mr. Bowers also requested a jury trial. He faces 44 counts of murder, hate crimes, and obstructing religious practices and other crimes. Prosecutors are seeking the death penalty while authorities call the attack on the Tree of Life synagogue the worst anti-Semitic incident in U.S. history. In addition to those killed, 6 people were injured, including 4 police officers, before Mr. Bauer surrendered to law enforcement.
How does this really work? This man goes to a synagogue during the Sabbath. A lot of people are praying. He shoots and then eventually surrenders to police officers. And in court, he pleads not guilty.
Well, I mean, he can plead not guilty, but the court process will kick in. The prosecutors, the criminal prosecutors will provide the evidence. In his own case, the evidence speaks for itself.
Sure.
So, but what will happen at the end of the day, 44 counts, there's a jury there, maybe at the end of the day, his lawyers will plead for manslaughter rather than outright murder, but I don't see how he can get away from this. I think the gentleman is guilty as charged because the evidence is overwhelming. And this, is important for the United States because it raises so many questions about hate crime, about, the hatred of Jews in particular, by certain persons, certain groups, and also about gun control. That's even the larger argument, but that this is coming at a sad time when the victims are just being buried. So I'm even more interested, not in him, pleading guilty, but those sad stories we've been reading about brothers that died, about the agony, of the families. And it just shows you how human cruelty, can be so destructive.
True. And it might have adverse effects on the midterm elections coming up in some days' time, certainly.
5 days.
Yes, so
starting on Tuesday.
Yeah, so we'll be looking at how things actually play out and how the voters would actually turn out or for against the Republicans, as the case may be.
Many thanks,
Thank
Aaron.
you very much, Aaron.
Right,
Thank you.
Doctor.
Yes.
Well, that's all on the news headlines. We'll take a short break now. When we return, it will be all about manufacturing.